3, 2.
Welcome to Long Beach Local News. I'm Melissa McGinnis with a very special report today. We're in the studio with Franklin Sims. Franklin, you join us from where?
I'm from the Long Beach Rebellion.
The Long Beach Rebellion. Well, we're here to discuss a very important and polarizing topic, if you will, which is Measure A.
Yeah.
What is Measure A?
Well, Measure A is, the mayor calls it a 1% tax increase. What it really is, it's effectively an 11% tax increase. What it is that it's going to be on the ballot June 7th, and what the mayor is asking, at least what it says on the ballot, is that for the 11% tax increase, the mayor is going to hire police, he's going to hire firemen, and he's going to fix infrastructure. And infrastructure is pretty broad. He's referring to everything from potholes to storm drains. And what Measure A effectively amounts to is $48 million a year. And so it's for a 10-year period. And then it sunsets after 10 years. But after 5 years, it begins to decrease. So it's almost like the sun setting. It goes down after 10 years. And that's generally what's going on with Measure A.
So this is a really impactful measure that's going to really affect the Long Beach citizens for 10 years. I know it sunsets after 5, but how does it affect an individual or a business personally?
Oh, well, that's actually the most important part. How does it affect us at home, and how does it affect our local business communities, our small businesses? And what it comes down to is that if you go buy a big screen TV for $1,000, before Measure A, you're going to pay $90 in tax. After Measure A, you're going to pay $100. If you go and buy a car, even if you try and escape the tax and go buy your car in Orange County, if your residence is in Long Beach, you're going to be taxed according to Long Beach. So what's going to happen is if you get a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 car, you're going to pay hundreds of more dollars for that big ticket item.
So if you buy a pack of gum at 7-Eleven, you're going to still be paying pennies more. Yes. So this is going to affect you in large ticket sales and small ticket sales. It's going to affect each and every one of us that lives in Long Beach. This Measure A and the money that's accumulated from it literally comes from our pockets.
It comes from our pockets, and what else is this? At the Rebellion, we look at Measure A through the lens of justice. And what I mean by that is this. If you're a senior on a fixed income in Long Beach, or if you're a single mom, which if you're an African American single mom in Long Beach, the poverty rate is at 35%. People who don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot of wealth, they actually spend more of their income on things that are taxed with the sales tax. So what it is, it's a greater penalty on our community members that don't have a lot. And it's for that reason that I had to get on board, because we have to look at all of Long Beach. That includes not only East Long Beach, but North Long Beach. And I think that when we embrace the entire community, we look at this issue as not just an issue of economics, but of economic justice. And that's really the voice that we're trying to bring to this issue.
Long Beach, we're live right now, so you're able to write us questions. Franklin's here to answer any questions that you might have. This directly affects you, not just for a short time, but for many years to come, literally coming money out of your pocket to pay for things like what I've seen the budget come through. It seems mostly it's dedicated to infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, alleys, stormwater protection, public safety infrastructure, libraries, parks, tree trimming. These are things that, do we necessarily need to raise this much money? And I've heard that over the 10 years of, this measure being in place, the amount comes to $2.8 billion. Is that true?
Yes. So you said a lot. So at least now there's a chart with some degree of detail that the mayor has provided. But when we first started this, and we didn't start it a long time ago, I'm talking like 3 weeks ago, when we first started, the mayor wasn't giving any details. And once we started pressuring and saying, hey, there are voices here that are not being heard, there are voices that are being silenced, all of a sudden, now first there was a special infrastructure meeting just before the city council meeting for the public. Now there are charts and other sort of increase, there's an increase, what seems to be an increase in information. But if you really look at it, it's not really that many specifics.
Well, here's what I'd like to point out on this chart. It just represents $150 million. That's nowhere near $2.8 billion. So where does the rest of the money go? Why, if we're going to be voting for this and paying for it, wouldn't it be fair to show us exactly where the money's going?
That could have been done. The mayor had a choice when he created Measure A. He had a choice to create this as a specific tax or as a general tax. He chose to create it as a general tax. What that means is that the money is not specifically allocated toward the police, toward the fire, toward so many potholes. Putting it into the general fund or creating a general tax means that this money can be spent on generally anything. And that's what the voters, once they learn about, are so impassioned and infuriated about. Because the mayor doesn't have to be specific about where he's going to spend the money because it's a general fund. But when you read the ballot measure and when you're receiving 3 times a week the publications that the mayor is sending out, it reads as if these things are specifically allocated and they're going to happen. But there are no legal protections that require that. And that's what we want the people to understand.
So voters out there that are watching this broadcast, how do you feel about this tax being put into a general fund where it's up to the discretion of the administration to allocate those monies to however they see fit? So it might be, shown here that $150 million goes to seemingly parks, potholes, and infrastructure, but where's the rest going? And are we ever going to be able to know and basically audit the rest of the money that basically comes out of our pockets?
What we can do is we can look at history to get an indication of what will happen. And when we look at historically what's happened with the general fund is that monies that were supposed to be used to make our city safe, free of potholes or have more police, a lot of times those monies have been used to increase salaries and increase pensions. And now we're facing a pension tsunami. The water is receding, and at any moment, the tsunami is going to come, and that money is going to be due. And so this $48 million a year, this over $2 billion, that money can be used for those salaries and those pensions. And that's the ugly truth. And but it's a truth. And as a city, we have to deal with this, and we have to face it head on.
Well, one of my concerns, if you will, was, in discussions early on about Measure A was, there's been an increase in crime here in Long Beach. We've had an 8th murder since January occur, primarily in the west and north sides of Long Beach. I don't see a line item for either crime prevention, more police. I know the South Police Station, is it South? You don't know. One of the police stations they had to let go of. That we so badly need in that area. And I know that there's a lot that's misspoken for. If there's only $150 million here on this chart, there's a lot over there that could be potentially used. But you would think that there'd be a line item for more police, more firemen, crime prevention activities. Does that mean that it's in the budget, or is that we're just not sure about that yet?
It doesn't. The truth is that the reason that you don't see that level of specificity is because it's intended. So what's going on here is this simple. The mayor needs to convince 50 plus 1, which is about 51% of voters, need to come out and say, hey, we want Measure A. If he can get that and convince them by selling them on things like, you're going to get more police, you're going to get more firemen. Who doesn't want more police and more firemen? If he can convince him to do that just on his handshake, then he'll take it. But the truth is that these specific allocations that you want, if he were to go and say, like, yes, I'm going to do this and make those pledges, then he'd be holding himself up to a standard that the people that are financing his campaign, They're just not going to let them. They're not going to let them spend that. They're not going to not have their payday, and that's what we have to be concerned about as residents.
So the mayor released this statement around 2 p.m. this afternoon that we need to improve 911 emergency response. Measure A has the support of our firefighters and police for a very good reason. They know it's what our city needs to keep it safe. So if this is so important, which it is, if I'm going to pay an increase in tax, which I do live here, this will actually, make me be involved in a very specific way. I want to make sure it is going to some of those things. This is so important to all of us. Why isn't it a line item?
That's what we've been asking. And we feel like that this is about responsible government. And since this is so vital, I have a 6-year-old. She's in kindergarten at Minigant. If the school were to burn down, or if officers were needed on campus, I want that to happen. But I want to know that it's going to happen. And we just can't. So on an issue like this, we have to ask our leaders, why didn't you put something on the ballot that the people could really trust in? Give us a law that gives us protection. And don't ask us. It's irresponsible for leaders to ask us to just take this on a handshake. This is a nation of laws. This is America. Give us a law, give us protections.
Facebook people that are watching out there, how do you feel about this basically being a handshake deal, this tax increase? And I'd like to reiterate, it's $2.8 billion. Does this city really need $2.8 billion? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for any major city, like a New York City even.
Well, let's talk about New York. So if we take our taxes, our sales tax, up to 10%, we would have a higher sales tax than San Francisco and New York. So here's Long Beach, a big city, but also pockets of it are sort of a bedroom community. Here you are imposing a tax, a greater tax than people who are paying in Manhattan and in San Francisco on Long Beach. This is not right. This is not just.
I think that's a really interesting point that you just pointed out. San Francisco, it has one of the highest levels of incomes in the country, and so does New York. So for Long Beach, which has one of the lowest rates of unemployment and low income pockets, why would we be paying a higher sales tax than those other wealthy cities?
Well, let me tell you this. There is a congressional candidate named Andy Whalen, and he's running for Congress here locally. He sent us some information where his people had done some research, and what they found was that over the past 4 years, the average household income in Long Beach has dropped 3%. And that's what makes this almost criminal. It's like you cannot impose this sort of tax increase that you'd be greater than what you'd be paying in New York or San Francisco on population and residents that are already suffering.
There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of great going on in Long Beach, but there is a lot of suffering here. And I know the unemployment rate is really low, and I know medium household incomes are lower than they have been in the past. So is it the right time to be raising our taxes that's going to come out of our pocket?
Well, what the mayor calls it is, he calls it this in his literature, and when he speaks around the community, he calls it an investment. He says it's time for Long Beach to make an investment. You haven't made an investment in 35 years. Well, we have to be logical. And what we have to say is, when we make investments, you want to invest in something secure.
Well, you want to know what you're investing in.
You want to know what you're investing in.
We don't know what we're investing in. We're going to be spending more every time we go anywhere in Long Beach. And as you mentioned, just being a resident here, and we don't know where the money's necessarily going. And I don't mind a sales increase if I know that it's going towards X, Y, and Z.
That's what we've noticed a lot. So when we're walking communities and we're talking to small businesses and to residents, owners, what they say is, I would love to see more police. And I don't like it that my local fire station is shut down. But what they don't like is that they're not being assured this with a guarantee. It's just a promise on a handshake. And that's just not enough for a lot of people. And what's amazing about it is sometimes these political issues can be divisive. and it turns into an issue of are you conservative or are you liberal? I can knock on a door that has a Bernie Sanders sign and talk about this issue, outraged. I can knock on a door that has a Trump sign or Cruz, whoever, and outraged once they hear about it. The whole city is.
Well, I think what's important about this conversation today, and thank you for the people that are leaving the comments below. We really appreciate your input coming in and keep them coming in. But what we'd really like to get across is just understanding the issue in totality. And again, we thank you for being here to really kind of give us both sides of the story, if you will. And we'd like to reiterate that we do have a voice, and we encourage everyone to use that voice through your vote. The voting is June 7th. If you'd like to find more information about what Franklin Sims is doing, where can they find your information?
Well, you can find out, so we're internet-based. So we're at longbeachrebellion.com. And if you go to longbeachrebellion.com, you'll find out how you can get involved. And if you're opposed to Measure A, or if you just want to learn about it, you can go to the site. And we don't force you to read anything. We have cool videos. You can watch the animated videos and learn about Measure A. But if you want to get involved, we've just received a generous donation, and we've got 500 yard signs. So what we'd like is you can go to the website, request a yard sign, and we'd like you to put it up because we need to inform the public and drive that vote out.
Information is key. Sergio just left us a message. Long Beach should put more policemen out there. Where's all the money going to? Forget about all the fancy stuff. Make Long Beach a safer place. I like this comment in the sense of infrastructure and $2.8 billion. To me, I look around the city, I live here, I know the potholes are out there, but I don't see infrastructure as a huge problem. We just had a huge investment down at the Pike. We're getting a new civic center. It looks like our infrastructure is really thriving. We have beautiful rainbow colored sidewalks. What else do you think that is really in desperate need?
Well, let's talk about priorities, okay? So we're talking about infrastructure. One of the things that's very interesting is that we're building a new city hall, okay, for a lot of money. And then we're going to have to lease that city hall back. A lot of the public isn't aware of this. It's really a bad deal for our city, but that's not the point. Well, it's part of the point. Also, what's going on is before that decision was made, there could have been a decision simply to retrofit the existing building, and it would have cost a fraction. But that choice wasn't made. So what we're dealing here is this is a question of trust. And the people are having a hard time trusting that this money is going to be spent on infrastructure and that so much more money is needed by the same city hall that makes decisions to build a new building when they could fix the one they have, since, as they say, we don't have the money to hire.
More environmentally sound anyway. We're trying to be a progressive green city here. Infrastructure is key to that. So could you tell us how much the new Civic Center did cost?
I'm not sure on that number, but I can bring it back to you.
Okay, well, we'll definitely have you back again. This is definitely a hot topic, and there's a lot to learn here, and we appreciate you being transparent with us. We also want to keep hearing from you, the viewers out there. What's important to you? We're getting a couple comments that, there's no discussion, a line item here about homelessness. We have a huge homeless population here, which I think is a potential catalyst of driving out businesses and driving out different types of groups that might come in, and enjoy our convention centers and things like that. Why is that not being addressed?
Well, I tell you what's interesting about homelessness in Long Beach. Every Tuesday at City Hall, there is a woman that comes up during the 3-minute public speaking. Rain or shine, sleet or snow, she's there. And for that 3 minutes, she advocates for the homeless. And she keeps pointing out, and she said about this infrastructure plan, she said there is nothing in here for the homeless. And it's true. It's true that there's nothing there, and it's true that there should be. The truth is that Measure A, not only is it not doing much for the homeless, but it's hurting people who are living paycheck to paycheck and could be homeless next month if they lost their jobs.
That's a good point. Would it be safe to say that the money that went into the new downtown civic center, is that money that could have been allocated towards these things versus just trying to raise our sales tax, or is that a loan that they took to build that big entity?
No, those are certainly monies that could have been, that are coming out of our budget. Now, are they creating other deals? Like even with the, I made a challenge one time recently in a press telegram interview. I said, listen, we talk about infrastructure, we talk about these potholes, but if the city needs to fix potholes, why do we just invest in bike lanes and all of these bikes? Doesn't it make sense to pave the streets first and then get the bikes? And what was the response that was given to me was, oh, that was a private-public partnership. And I find it interesting that when it comes to things like bicycles, that the city council can come up with creative ways to finance them. But when it comes to something as basic as our infrastructure and as our police and fire, the only thing that they can come up with is tax the people.
So the police and fire department, it's claimed that they're on board. Is that because they know, even though it's not spelled out how much money is going to go to, they know they'll be thrown a bone here or there?
Let's be clear. It is not the police and the fire department that are behind it. It is the police union and the fire union that is behind it. So there are a lot of rank and file policemen and firemen who, aren't necessarily for this tax. So that's I think that's very important to remember. The other thing is, a lot of times the rebellion is made to look like, and other voters, we've got people that are afraid to put up the sign that says no on Measure A because they're fearful that, well, what if there's some sort of retaliation from the police? But the truth is that the unions are standing behind it. They've given the mayor $200,000. Okay, and they're funding his Yes on Measure A campaign. And what has happened historically is that these special interest groups usually get a raise or a kick up in salary or in pensions after something like this passes.
So that even though they're not allocated in the budget, as we can see it, they know eventually down the line, most likely, not guaranteed though, but most likely, something will happen in terms of pensions or salary increase. It doesn't necessarily indicate that more police will be on the street.
Well, let me be clear. What's going on is that once it's in the general fund, then the city council, nearly everyone on city council has received money from these same special interest groups. Once the $48 million every year goes into the general fund, let's say, and you're a council person that's received some money for your campaign where you were victorious, and the mayor has received money for his campaign that was victorious, and the police union, which Mr. James has publicly stated in the newspaper that he will be seeking salary increases. The truth is that without this $48 million, without this injection of revenue that's going to be coming from seniors, coming from single mothers, and coming from the poor.
Coming from me, you.
Everyone. Without that injection, there's not the money for those raises and for those benefits. So, and it's that crowd of suspicion that has people distrusting. And what I don't like, Melissa, is the culture of fear. When the mayor goes out and he speaks to the public, he brings the police chief and the fire chief, and they essentially tell you, if you don't vote for Measure A, if you live in a nice part of town, your car is going to be broken into. If you live in a bad part of town, you could be physically assaulted, if not killed, of course. And what the police chief essentially says is, hey, we're understaffed, and we might get to that fire not as quickly. And then the mayor comes up and he says two things. First he says, Long Beach is doing great. We're doing all these great things. And then he says, but you really ought to be afraid and vote for Measure A. And it's that culture of fear that we just can't have. Long Beach can be exceptional on the monies that it has, But what it means is they'll have to do the same thing that we have to do at home.
Cut back.
Tighten our belts.
Yep, get on a budget. So, we don't want to take up too much more of your time, and we hope you do come and join us. We really appreciated you explaining this to us. But is it typical for a city to raise sales tax like this? Is this initiative, is this normal?
Unfortunately, it's in becoming a new normal. So if the mayor gets what he wants, and Long Beach's sales tax goes up to 10%, we'll be basically second behind Chicago. Now, when you listen to news about Chicago, it's usually not very good things. But what's going on is that, so Chicago's tax is going to be, I think, about 10.25%.
It is really high. I was recently there. I noticed that. Mm-hmm. It makes your bill completely different. You don't think it's going to affect you, but it actually really does.
I'm on 4th Street, and I'm talking to a local business owner, and I asked her, I said, well, what do you think about this? And she says, well, I'm kind of split on it. So then we ask her to explain. And when she explains it, all of her reasons were about why this isn't a good idea. And one of the things she says is that her shop attracts a lot of tourists. She says when the tourists come here and we tell them that something is $100 and then the tax is going to be $11, when they see that increase after we've told them, oh, this is $100, and then they see their final bill, they're like, oh, what's going on? Well, we don't need to be hurting our small businesses at a time like this.
Long Beach is made up of mostly small businesses. What is it, 80% of the businesses here? I don't know the exact
number. And a lot
number.
of them are family owned. We've been coming across them, and these people are warm people. They're nice people, and they just don't deserve this.
Well, again, we thank you for being here again as well. We'd love to continue to hear from you, from our viewers, what's important to you. And just to kind of wrap up and summarize what we've discussed today, is there is a tax measure called Measure A that's going to be on your ballot June 7th. And Long Beach, you have a voice. You can vote yes for the measure if you think this is a good thing to do to raise our sales tax for the city to create $2.8 billion of funds, or you could vote no if you think that you don't want to invest in a general fund that doesn't necessarily describe where your money is going to go to. So far, again, we've only seen $150 million allocated to infrastructure, tree trimming, and parks, and things like that. That leaves a lot of money remaining, and again, it's a general fund, so it's up to the discretion of the administration to allocate those funds however they see fit. But it's up to us as citizens to get informed and vote on whichever way we feel most comfortable. So thank you, Franklin. We hope you come back to join us again. Good luck on your walks.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you all you do educating us. It's our job to be educated, Long Beach, so let's continue that process. And thank you for joining us. Stay tuned to Long Beach Local News for more special reports and more discussion on measures.